Welcome to the Cryptids and Mythical Creatures Iceberg. Throughout history, there have been no shortage of different types of cryptids and mythologies that have been created and spread throughout the entire world and regions and cultures. People all over the globe have been fascinated with them, just like myself, for centuries, and I figured why not share my likeness of them with all of you. In this video, I will be going over each creature individually and give a brief analysis of them, go over their origins, sightings, and such, just different things centered around themselves. Here on screen somewhere is the iceberg that I will be basing this on. So for right now, we are on tier 1 only. There are so many on this iceberg that I will have to break them up individually into separate videos. So if you would like to see the rest of them, if you enjoy this video, let me know please in the comment section, and I will begin to do the research and get all the necessities that I need to create those videos for you guys. And I can continue all the way down to tier 10, I believe there's 10 tiers, and explain them all. Before we begin, I would like to give a shout out to Melancholy on iceberg.com, for they are the creator of the iceberg, and this video and this potential series would not be possible without them, so I appreciate it. Thank you so much. I will have them and their work on iceberg.com linked in the description, so you can go check that out for yourself, and also check out the iceberg that will be linked down there as well. And with all that being said, without further ado, let's get into tier 1 of the Cryptids and Mythical Creatures Iceberg, starting with the Loch Ness Monster. The Loch Ness Monster, also known as Nessie, is a large marine creature believed by some to live in a loch in the Scottish Highlands. Reports of a monster living in Loch Ness date back all the way to ancient times, as local stone carvings depict a mysterious beast with flippers. And the first written account of this mysterious beast was in a biography of St. Columba in 565 AD. According to his work, the monster had bit a swimmer and was going to bite another one when Columba told it to back off. So yeah, after Columba intervened, the monster just obeyed and went back into the water. And then over centuries, only occasional sightings were reported. Many of these alleged encounters with this mysterious beast seemed very, very highly inspired by Scottish folklore, which is filled to the brim with large marine creatures. And so by 1933, the Loch Ness Monster's legend began to grow and grow and grow. After an incident where a couple seemed to have seen this mythical water beast flopping around or just crawling on the road, numerous sightings occurred after, and lots of reports. The news of all these sightings only seemed to spur efforts in proving this monster's existence, though. But in 1934, English physician Robert Kenneth Wilson seemed to have photographed this creature. The iconic photo, which it would be the one that is on screen now because you most likely know this photo, which is now known as the surgeon's photograph, appeared to show the monster's head and neck. But 60 years later, in 1994, it was revealed that Wilson's photograph was a hoax and was actually a plastic and wooden head attached to a toy submarine. Good job, Robert. The Daily Mail had printed this photograph, and it had sparked an international sensation. Many speculate that this creature that they think the Loch Ness is a plesiosaur, which is a marine reptile that had went extinct some 65.5 million years ago. The Loch Ness area attracted tons of monster hunters, and over the years, several sonar explorations were undertaken to locate the creature. But, however, none were successful. In addition, numerous photographs allegedly showed the beast, but all of them were disproven fairly easily. And in 2018, researchers conducted a DNA survey of the loch that the Loch Ness Monster was said to inhabit to determine what kind of organisms had lived in that water, but there was no evidence that a plesiosaur or any type of animal this closely related to what the Loch Ness Monster would be even remotely lived in this area. However, the results did indicate the presence of large eels, and so the possibility of Nessie, the Loch Ness Monster, being a large eel may be true as well. And despite this lack of conclusive evidence, the Loch Ness Monster is still one of the most well-known cryptids still to this day. It was one of the first that I had ever heard of, and one of the most interesting, as well as there is so many disputes on what this animal could have been, and once again, if it's real. I personally don't believe that the Loch Ness Monster exists. I do believe that these photographs of what they presume to be the Loch Ness Monster are 100% just different animals. Like I said, the oversized eel, or not the plesiosaur, but a type of marine reptile, sort of like that. Bigfoot, or the Sasquatch, is a giant ape-like creature that some people believe roams North America. Just like the aforementioned Loch Ness monster, there is very little evidence that a Bigfoot or a Sasquatch is real, but that does not stop monster hunters from trying to prove this monster's existence. Personally, before we even start, I do not believe Bigfoot is real. The being of Bigfoot, there are obviously gigantic bipedal apes, but I don't think Bigfoot on its own is a real thing. Most Bigfoot sightings occur in Northwest America, where they can be linked to many indigenous myths and legends. Scientific evidence for a modern day Bigfoot is proving elusive, but a giant bipedal ape did once roam the earth. A species named Gigantopithecus blacki was about 10 feet tall and weighed about 600 pounds. However, Gigantopithecus lived in Southeast Asia and not North America, and went extinct thousands of years ago. If anything, this was the Yeti, which is a completely different creature that we'll get to later, rather than Bigfoot. As early as 1884, the British colonist newspaper in Victoria, Canada, published an account of a gorilla-type creature that was captured in the area. After this, other accounts quickly followed, which were largely decreed as hoaxes. Of course, there's gonna be a lot of parallels between a lot of these creatures, as once one newspaper article goes out about them, an immense amount of them ensue afterwards, which are obviously just people trying to either make a quick buck or just try to get their 15 minutes. Sasquatch book author John Green compiled a list of about 1,300 sightings through the 19th and 20th centuries. The modern day Sasquatch gained a new life during the 1950s, 100%. In 1958, the Humboldt Times, which is a local newspaper in Northern California, published a story about the discovery of big footprints near Bluff Creek. In the story, they referred to this creature that made these footprints as Bigfoot. These footprints, however, were a prank by a man named Ray Wallace, and they were disproven in 2002 after his children actually came out and told them that it was a hoax, that it was a lie. By that time, though, Bigfoot had already established itself as a household name, and it was extremely popular throughout the continent. And since that article in 1958, an immense amount of Sasquatch tracks, photos, videos, just all this sorts of evidence just ran rampant, ran wild. And in the last 50 years, there have been more than 10,000 eyewitness cases and eyewitness accounts of Bigfoot. In these accounts, Bigfoot is usually described as being around 8 to 10 feet tall and extremely hairy. Some people often claim that they can hear Bigfoot's howls, screams, shrieks, growls, and other types of vocalizations. Unfortunately for the Bigfoot legend, eyewitness reports are among the most common to prove Bigfoot's existence. So unfortunately, they're based on human memories, and everybody knows that human memories are extremely unreliable. The most famous Bigfoot video is a short film shot in 1967 by Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin, known as the Patterson-Gimlin film. Shot in Bluff Creek, it shows, I'll just put it on screen for you. Basically, it shows this Bigfoot walking. It turns to the camera and continuously walking. It just shows a bipedal ape walking, looking at the camera and walking. Continue to walk. The video's authenticity is still debated to this day, and it will continue to be a topic of debate for a very long time, because it is very hard to disprove that is not Bigfoot because it's on video. But there's also a very high chance that it's literally just a man in a costume. There's no way to disprove it. There's no way to prove it. But the thing is, with Bigfoot, with the rise of all of these high technology cameras, these 4K, these 8K, 12K, 1664K cameras, and all of these stunning images and stunning videos of just the earth and trees and deer and just water creatures, blue whales and let's say tables and in the sky and the moon, the space and everything and all of that shit. How is there not one singular hard 4K, 2K, 1K video, picture, anything of Bigfoot? There's not one. There's zero. Literally zero. There's not a singular picture, video, anything as of late. The logical explanation is that these creatures just don't exist, and all of these photographs of them are just merely hoaxes or misidentifications. However, there's no exclusive hard evidence that Bigfoot doesn't exist. And when it comes to cryptids like Bigfoot, the human brain is capable of making up explanations for events that we cannot immediately interpret, and many people just want to believe that it exists. Giants in folklore are huge mythical beings, usually human-like in form. In folklore, giants are, like I said, beings of human appearance, but at times are prodigious in size and strength, or bear like an otherwise notable appearance because of how large they are. Giants loom large in world mythology, frequently representing like the most ominous of foes. Their huge size immediately evokes ideas of superhuman strength and formidable abilities, and yet in many legends the giant is in fact a tragic character, often suffering an incongruous death. In various Indo-European mythologies, gigantic peoples are featured as primeval creatures associated with chaos and the wild nature, and they are frequently in conflict with the gods, that being Olympian, Celtic, and Norse. Giants also often play similar roles in different mythologies that are Indo-European, such as Narsian traditions, and there are also plenty of other mythologies that giants are derived from, such as, I will go ahead and read them off for you: Abrahamic, biblical mythology, Armenian, Baltic, Basque, Bulgarian, Celtic, Greek, Native American, Norse, Roman, and Slavic mythology. And giant figures are often also associated in fairy tales, such as the BFG, Jack and the Giant Beanstalk, Jack the Giant Killer, and such and such. Now, when we talk about mythologies and cryptids and stuff like that, I feel like giants are one of the most likely to be real on the entire list, because we walk around, the people on Earth now, people 7'3", 7'4", I would consider those to be a giant of peoples. Those are giant people. There have been people that have been literally recorded 8 feet tall. That is a giant. Now, who's to say? You know how way back when, millions of years ago, there were gigantic, like insects that are super tiny now used to be humongous, or just like birds in general, like that huge ass bird. I don't know what it's called, but you know what I'm talking about. I'll probably put on screen those huge ass birds, or how there was like giant millipedes or giant centipedes and stuff like that. They have just devolved in size over time. I feel like that has happened with people. Like, I think that giants were a thing at one point. I think the normal was an 8 foot tall person. Like how a normal man is 5'6". What if a normal man way back when was 8 feet tall? Like, just over time, we've devolved into our 5'6" selves. I think that giants are most likely to be real. And the fact that giants are in every single folklore and mythology throughout the entire globe is just more proof, in my opinion, that they were once real. The fact that there's so much evidence in every single different culture, and every single different culture incorporates them, is nuts to me. It's crazy. So yeah, that's my reasoning that I believe giants were a real thing. I don't think to the stature of like 100 feet tall beings fighting with gods. I don't believe in that. But just like the normal being like an 8 foot tall person, I believe that. Anyways, moving on. In West Virginia folklore, the Mothman... I'm sorry. I'm still on the giants. I am sorry. I just ranted for like 6 minutes about giants. We continue. In West Virginia folklore, the Mothman is a humanoid creature to have been reportedly seen in the Point Pleasant area from around November 15th, 1966 to December 15th of 1967. The first newspaper report was published in the Point Pleasant Register, dated November 16th, 1966, titled "Couples See Man-Sized Bird Creature... something." The national press soon picked up this story and spread it all the way across the entire nation. The Mothman was introduced to a wider audience by Gray Barker in 1970 and was later popularized I can't fucking say popularized. And was later popularized by John Keel in his 1975 book, The Mothman Prophecies, claiming that there were supernatural events that led to these recent sightings and a connection to the collapse of the Silver Bridge. The book was later adapted into a 2002 film starring Richard Gere, and every year a festival called the Mothman Festival in Point Pleasant is devoted to the Mothman legend. The Kraken is a legendary sea monster of enormous size said to appear off the coasts of Norway. Originating in Scandinavian folklore, the Kraken is usually depicted as an aggressive cephalopod-like creature capable of destroying entire ships and dragging them deep in the waters below, and obviously dragging sailors to their death. According to stories, this huge many-armed creature was able to grab the top of the ship's main mast and drag it down. A Kraken would attack a ship by wrapping its arms around the hull of the ship, capsizing it. So basically just a gigantic bear hug like this. Just like that. The whole crew would then be either drowned or eaten by the monster. The most danger the Kraken presented was the immense amount of disturbance it made when it surfaced and the whirlpool it would create when it desurfaced. And because fish were attracted to the vicinity of the Kraken, Norwegian fishermen would often find themselves fishing right above it, despising the risk of losing not only their entire ships, but their lives. And so later Kraken stories present it as not as large as it once was, but still a very large creature. Not as enormous, but still monstrous. Though early depictions of the Kraken show it as as more crab-like in appearance, only towards the 18th century is when it started showing up as a giant cephalopod octopus or squid-like creature. In 1802, a French scientist, Pierre Montfort, stated in his book on the natural history of mollusks that the creature encountered by the Norwegian fishermen was known as the Kraken octopus. Montfort even suggested that there was an even larger creature out there, the colossal octopus, that had been known to attack sailing vessels. So what's amazing about the Kraken is that we have not only the most, but the best evidence that it was real. Out of all of these sea monsters, stories, the Loch Ness monster and everything else, sea serpents and everything, we have the most hard evidence that the Kraken was once or could have been a thing. It being the colossal squid. While a colossal octopus may have also fit the description, the colossal squid is just a much more aggressive creature. Yeah, so colossal squid. So yeah, this Kraken might just be an early colossal squid, a more aggressive. I believe colossal squids are aggressive, but the Kraken would have been a more aggressive one that surfaced, and it would have been easier to be seen by man. The Dover demon is a creature reportedly sighted in the town of Dover, Massachusetts from April 21st, 1977 to April 22nd, 1977. While driving on April 21st, 1977, a 17-year-old by the name of William Bartlett claimed that he saw a large-eyed creature with long, slender, tendril-like fingers and glowing eyes on top of a broken stone wall on Farm Street in Dover, Massachusetts. 15-year-old John Baxter also reported seeing this same creature the same day, just during the evening. And another 15-year-old, Abby Brabham, they claimed to have seen this creature the following night on Springdale Avenue. The teenagers all drew sketches of this creature, and even William Bartlett wrote on his sketch that I, Bill Bartlett, swear on a stack of Bibles that I seen this creature. Many skeptics believe that the Dover demon was just a baby moose, a lost baby moose on its own trail. It was just seen in very unusual conditions that made it seem like a weird, bizarre, unreal, weird-looking humanoid creature thing. People who don't believe that explanation about the baby moose point out that all of the sightings happened around the wrong time of the year for a moose to be out, a moose to be there, especially a moose that small to even exist in the area. And they also point out that Massachusetts is an unnormal spot for a moose to habitat. In my opinion, I believe that it may have just been a baby moose that was lost. I'm certain you've seen animals that are not supposed to be where they are. Maybe this is just an instance of a baby moose being lost. Vampires are evil mythological beings who roam the world at night searching for people whose blood they feast upon. Most people associate vampires with the legendary Count Dracula, the blood-sucking subject of Bram Stoker's Dracula. There are almost as many different characteristics of vampires as there are vampire legends, but the one characteristic that always stays the same, is that they feed on human blood. They typically drain their victims' blood with their fangs, killing them and turning them into vampires. In general, vampires hunt at night because the sunlight weakens their powers. Some have the ability to morph or transform into a wolf or a bat. Vampires have super strength and often have a sort of sensual, hypnotic effect on their victims. They cannot see their own image in a mirror and they cast no shadows. Vampire superstition thrived in the Middle Ages, especially when the plague was decimating entire towns. The disease often left bleeding mouth lesions on its victims, and so to the uneducated, it looked like a case of vampirism. So it wasn't uncommon for anyone with an unfamiliar physical or emotional illness to be labeled as a vampire. Many researchers have pointed to porphyria, a blood disorder that can cause severe blisters on the skin if exposed to sunlight, as a disease that may have been linked to the vampire legend. And some symptoms of porphyria can be relieved by ingesting blood. So this idea of a legendary creature that gets hurt by sunlight or needs blood to survive would heavily be influenced by this disease. Like I said before, sunlight weakens. They literally only feed on blood. Those are directly correlating to porphyria. Other diseases that were blamed for promoting the vampire legend were also like rabies or goiter. When a suspected vampire died, their bodies were often disinterred for any signs of vampirism. And then, in some cases, a stake would be thrusted through the corpse's heart just to make sure that they stay dead. Once again, leading to the vampire myth of only you can kill them with stake. Other accounts describe the decapitation or burning of these bodies of suspected vampires well into the 19th century. So all of these things I just said at the very end all have real world applications that just fed into the legend of vampires, the myth of the vampire. A golem is an animated anthropomorphic being in Jewish folklore which is created entirely out of inanimate matter, usually being clay or mud. The Talmud relates to a tale of rabbis who grew hungry on a journey, so they created a calf from the mud of the earth and ate it for dinner. The Kabbalists determined that the rabbis did this magical act by means of permuting language and primarily utilizing the formulas that are written in the book of creation. Just as God speaks and creates in the Genesis story, so too can the mystic. Thus, under the rarest of circumstances, a human being may imbue lifeless matter with that intangible but essential spark of life, that being the soul. The Kabbalists saw the creation of a golem as sort of an alchemical task, the accomplishment of which proved the adept's skill and knowledge of Kabbalah, which is Jewish mysticism. In popular legend, however, the golem kind of became a sort of folk hero. Tales of mystical rabbis creating life from dust abounded, particularly in the early modern period, and inspired such tales such as Frankenstein and the Sorcerer's Apprentice. Sometimes the golem saves the Jewish community from persecution or death, enacting the kind of heroism or revenge unavailable to powerless Jews. Often, however, Jewish folktales about the golem tell what happens when things go awry, when the power of life force goes astray, often with tragic results. An ogre is a legendary monster usually depicted as a large, hideous, man-like being that eats ordinary human beings, especially infants and children. Ogres frequently feature in mythology, folklore, and fairy tales throughout the entire world. In mythology, ogres are usually depicted as inhumanly large, tall, and having a disproportionately large head, an abundance of hair, unusually colored skin, a voracious appetite, and a strong body. Ogres are closely linked with giants and cannibals throughout mythology. In both folklore and fiction, giants are often given ogreish traits, such as in Jack and the Beanstalk and Jack the Giant Killer. Meanwhile, ogres are usually given giant-like traits as well. And then the idea of an ogre can also be used in a metaphoric sense in literature, as a seducer who devours its victims in a sexual sense is a kind of ogre. Meanwhile, a political tyrant or dictator who controls and exploits others is also a kind of ogre. And, of course, the most famous ogre that you know, that I know, that the entire world knows 100% would be Shrek from Shrek. The sea serpent is a mythological and legendary marine animal that traditionally resembles an enormous snake. It is described in various mythologies such as Mesopotamian, Greek, and Norse, and many more. The belief in huge creatures that inhabited the deep is widespread throughout the ancient world. In the Old Testament, there are many allusions to a primordial combat between God and a monstrous adversary, variously named like Leviathan or Rahab. Although references to a Leviathan are more dragon-like, the name has also been used to denote a sea monster. The name has also been used to denote a sea monster in general. Analogies to this combat are found throughout the ancient Middle East, as Babylonian literature records a battle between the god Marduk and the multi-headed dragon Tiamat. Although tales of sea serpents have continued to exist throughout the centuries, no animal has been captured so far that has not been proved to belong to a previously well-known group. A large number of the authenticated stories of monstrous marine creatures seem to be explicable as incorrect observations of already well-known animals. Large masses of seaweed before have been misidentified as large creatures. Basking sharks, marine worms, ribbon fish or oarfish, and sea lions have all been used as explanations for evidence of these so-called sea serpents. The Goatman is a humanoid cryptid most commonly associated with Louisiana, Maryland, and Texas. It is described as a 7-foot-tall hybrid creature, half man and half goat, part man and part goat. The urban legends tell of it killing young couples in parked cars or scouring the neighborhood for family pets. And there are also tales of it breaking into people's houses and raping its victims. Many attest to the areas that he haunts, but it doesn't matter if you're a woman, a man, a child, an animal, he's going to overtake you nonetheless. When people talk about the Goatman, not all describe him as the same thing. Some say he was a man who kept a flock of goats and got mad when teenagers ended up killing them off. But some people depict the Goatman to be some sort of science experiment gone wrong, as a scientist was supposedly conducting experiments on a goat when something went extremely wrong, and it turned him and the goat into one being. And then lastly, another version of the Goatman was that he was just an old hermit who lived in the woods and could be seen walking around. A dwarf is an entity that dwells in the mountains and within the earth. This entity is associated with mining, smithing, wisdom, and crafting. Dwarves in folklore are usually depicted as very small men with long beards, while female dwarves are hardly ever mentioned. In appearance, they were sometimes beautiful, but usually they are depicted as just tiny old men with long beards, and in some cases with humped backs. The mountain dwarves were organized in kingdoms or tribes with their own kings, chieftains, and armies. They lived in subterranean halls believed to be filled with gold and precious stones. They were principally famous for their skill in metalwork and forging, like swords and rings and different types of jewelry, but they were also credited with profound wisdom and secret knowledge, being able to foresee the future, assume other forms, and make themselves invisible. Many legends show dwarves being kindly beings and very generous to those who pleased them, but very vengeful to the ones that didn't. The Swiss dwarfs, or the Earthmen, are dwarves who sometimes helped in agriculture. They would find stray animals or even put out firewood or fruit for poor children to find. In Scandinavia and Germany, they were also very friendly to men, but sometimes would occasionally steal corn or tease cattle and surprisingly abduct children and women. Services rendered to them would often be repaid in gold, but if you were to steal their treasure, you would be met with great misfortune, or you would find that your gold would turn into dead leaves when you got home. And then finally, mind-dwelling dwarves were usually more capricious and spiteful than the mountain dwarves or the earthmen. They could be heard moving about in the lower levels, and were sometimes seen by miners who would also take care of them, and they would give them gifts of food and all sorts of different things. Now, there are plenty more types of dwarves out there. There's mind dwarves, and like I said, there's we talked about the mountain dwarves, the earth dwarves. There's a shit ton of different types that I can't get all the way through right now, but just know that there's a lot of them. The Gargoyle is a fantasy and horror monster inspired by the Gargoyle architectural element. Gargoyles are usually lumped into one category as the strange and horrific carvings and statuary on buildings, serving as these spiritual guardians that watch over the city and those below them. While all such creatures are termed as gargoyles, a gargoyle in its true form is that of a waterspout. The other creatures that were set to adorn a building but not as a waterspout were also known as grotesque. Many gargoyles and grotesques are anthropomorphic, zoomorphic, and very monstrous. Still, gargoyle has become the all-encompassing term for creatures that are carved on architecture and guard the gardens and the buildings and the cities and the people below who love them. The medieval period held many superstitious stories and legends and proceeds of great structural art, and among these are the gargoyles that decorated churches and important buildings. The stone carvings served as illustrations for those who were illiterate, documenting stories and life, recording it all in an indestructible image that can be interpreted and read and understood by all. And no one really truly knows the origins behind the gargoyle, although many theories and legends have arisen more and more over time. And now whether they are actually valid, no one really knows for sure, of course. And also many people view the gargoyles as a sort of spiritual protector of churches as well, scaring off, demons and evil spirits and everything under the sun. Dragons in mythologies and legends are large lizard or serpent-like creatures conceived in some traditions as evil and in some beneficial. In general, in the Middle Eastern world, where snakes are large and deadly, the serpent or dragon was symbolic of evil. Meanwhile, the Greeks and Romans, while accepting this Middle Eastern idea of the serpent as an evil power, also at times conceived the dragon as beneficial. On the whole, however, the evil reputation of dragons was stronger and had more weight to it, and in Europe it outlived the other. Christianity confused the ancient benevolent and malevolent serpent deities in a common condemnation. In Christian art, the dragon was depicted as a symbol of sin and paganism, and as such was depicted prostrate beneath saints and martyrs. So naturally, in medieval Europe, the dragon's look became sort of a winged creature with barbed tails and the ability to breathe fire. Now, the dragon's form did vary throughout time. The dragon Tiamat had 4 legs and a scaly body and wings, while as the biblical dragon in Revelations, the old serpent was a many-headed hydra. And because dragons not only possessed a sort of protective and terror-inspiring quality, they were used as decorative effigies as well. So dragons were used as sort of a warlike emblem, being painted on shields and carved onto the prows of ships. In East Asian mythologies, the dragon retains its prestige and is viewed as more of a beneficial creature. The dragon then came to Japan with much of the Chinese culture, and there it became capable of changing its size at will and even becoming invisible. Both Japanese and Chinese dragons, though regarded as powers in the air, are usually wingless. Dragons also figure in the other ancient mythologies of Asia, such as Korea, India, and Vietnam, and then much more. In folklore, a mermaid is an aquatic creature with the head and upper body of a female and the bottom half of a fish. Mermaids are often associated with perilous events in the sea, such as giant storms, floods, shipwrecks, and drownings. They can be either benevolent or beneficent, bestowing boons or falling in love with humans. Now, the male equivalent of a mermaid is a merman, and they are not as common as mermaids are in folklores and different cultures and traditions, but they are generally assumed to coexist with their female counterparts. Now, the male and female collectively are known as merpeople or merfolk. The conception of mermaids in the West are most likely to have been influenced by the sirens of Greek mythology, which were originally half bird-like but turned more half fish-like during the Christian era. Different type of historical events such as Christopher Columbus sighting of the mermaids were most likely sightings of just other aquatic animals, other aquatic mammals like manatees and different things like that. And while there's no evidence that mermaids exist outside of folklore, reports of mermaids still continue to this day. And I remember in 2012, I think it was the Discovery Channel made a fake documentary on mermaids and pretty much tricked the entire nation into thinking that this was real. Because I remember watching it, and when it was over, I was pissed off because I learned that it was real, and it made me that it wasn't real, and it made me extremely upset. Why are we doing that? Bro, it was so convincing. This documentary was so convincing that the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration had to issue an official statement denying its authenticity because of how many people were asking them and emailing them and talking to them about this documentary. Why are we tricking people like that? I don't know. I still do not believe mermaids are a real thing, although they are in lots and lots of cultures. I do not believe in a half man, half fish type deal thing. A gnome is a subterranean goblin or earth spirit who guards mines of precious treasures hidden in the earth. He is represented in medieval mythologies as a small, physically deformed, usually hunchbacked creature resembling a dry, gnarled old man. So gnomes as a whole tend to live in like hilly meadows and rocky woodland. They live in 3 trees. So we have the house itself with a hidden entrance from another tree, and then a third is the supply room, which usually contains like beans and potatoes, grains, and then anything else a gnome might need for the winter. A gnome is a diminutive spirit in Renaissance magic and often in alchemy, living underground. Gnomes consist of a number of different types. The most common being the forest gnome, who rarely comes into contact with man. The garden gnome, who lives in old gardens and likes to tell melancholy tales. Dune gnomes, who are slightly larger than their woodland brethren. House gnomes, who have the most common with man, usually even using its language. And it is from this family that the gnome kings are chosen. Farm gnomes, who resemble their house brethren, but are a lot more conservative in manner. And then there are Siberian gnomes, who have been more interbred than the other groups of gnomes, and then they associate freely with trolls. They are the much larger types of gnome, and they are a lot more nasty and mean than the other ones as well. So gnomes usually are small and humpbacked, but in some mythologies, they can be as large as giants. Most gnomes are 7 times stronger than men and can run up to 35 miles per hour and have even better eyesight than hawks. These abilities help gnomes do an immense, a large amount of things. One notably being like the eyesight, being able to see like wounded animals and be able to help them. Because of their love of animals, they feel responsible for them, and gnomes and animals live in harmony within each other, and they are willing to help them at any point in time. Male gnomes are the guardians of all animals, and they show little to no preference in which animal they like more, and so they don't show any aversion to like domesticating their like own cats and own animals and other things. But most especially, they love gems and different types of jewelry, and they are considered by many to be the best gem cutters and jewelers in existence. The Chupacabra is a Latin America popular legend. It's a monstrous creature that attacks animals and has a very strong desire for blood. As a fearsome but probably non-existent creature, Chupacabra has been characterized as pretty much the southern version of the Sasquatch, or should I say southern equivalent. They're not the same like being. Physical descriptions of this creature may vary because in southwestern United States it's more dog-like, while in other cultures it's described more alien-like or more reptilian-like, and some even report it to being as like heavy set as like a bear. Sightings have been reported in Puerto Rico since the 1970s, and this creature has been reported as north as Maine, as south as Chile, and even outside of the Americas, in countries like Russia and the Philippines. All of the reports are anecdotal, and a lot of them are usually just disregarded as like fake and as false, as there's no real evidence for them. Now, of course, according to biologists and like wildlife management officials, the Chupacabra is just an urban legend. Now, a different type of Chupacabra has also been cited in northern Mexico and the southern United States, it being a lot smaller and standing on 4 feet, being generally canine in appearance but hairless. And actual like specimens of this type of Chupacabra were produced, but ended up just being identified as like coyotes and wolves and dogs and just other canines. The animals that were hairless and were being reported as a Chupacabra usually were just victims of mange, which is an infestation of an itch mite. And it's suggested that the reason that these canines were attacking livestock is because the debilitating effects of the mange were putting like their wild prey completely out of their reach. So they turned to attacking livestock because it was much easier. An elf is a type of humanoid supernatural being in Germanic mythology and folklore. In medieval Germanic-speaking cultures, elves generally seem to be thought of as beings with magical powers and supernatural beauty, ambivalent towards everyday people, capable of either helping or hindering people. However, the details of these have been considerably varied over time and have flourished in both pre-Christian and Christian cultures. And in early modern folklore, they were connected closely with fairies. However, since J.R.R. Tolkien's fantasy novels, which include elves have become more popular and tend to take on more of a human-like shape. Elves have been portrayed to be long-lived or immortal, and they have magical powers attributed to them, usually the powers being related to nature. Elves are usually pictured as young men and women of great beauty living in forests and other natural places like underground, in wells, or even in springs. Elves, as a whole, have many forms. Some are tiny, some are small, and female elves often seem human-like, but some say they are empty from the back, kind of like a hollow tree. In other cultures, they are also portrayed as children with distinctly different facial characteristics and hair. They are not evil, but they might annoy the hell out of you or even interfere in human affairs. And they are sometimes said to be invisible, and in this vein, this is where the comparisons and the close relations between fairies and elves are. Now, although elves are usually portrayed as beautiful and potentially helpful beings, there are also alignments of elves with demons and more sinister behavior, such as harming or killing humans and livestock. From a scientific viewpoint, of course, elves are considered objectively not real. However, elves in many places and regions have been believed to be real things. Where enough people have believed in the reality of elves and that they have a real impact in the world, they can be understood as part of people's worldviews and a social reality. Like the exchange of a dollar bill or the sense of pride stirred up by a national flag is real because of a people's belief rather than an objective reality. A ghost is the soul or spirit of a dead animal or person that can appear to the living. Descriptions of ghosts vary widely, as some can be this translucent, wisping body of air, or can be realistic, lifelike forms, or just be completely invisible. Now, the deliberate attempt to contact a spirit of a dead person is known as necromancy, or in spiritism, it would be known as a seance. The belief in the existence of an afterlife is, as well as manifestations of the dead, is extremely widespread throughout the entire world. And certain religious practices, such as funeral rites, exorcisms, and some practices of spiritualism and ritual magic, are specifically designed to rest the spirits of the dead. Ghosts are generally described as solitary human-like essences, though stories of ghostly armies and ghostly animals rather than humans have also been recounted. They are believed to haunt particular locations and different types of objects that they are connected to when they were alive. And according to a 2009 study by the Pew Research Center, 18% of Americans at the time said that they have seen a ghost. But the overwhelming consensus, of course, is that ghosts are not real and that there is no proof that they exist. Their existence, however, is impossible to falsify, and ghost hunting has become sort of a pseudoscience. But even despite centuries of investigation, there is no scientific evidence that any one location is inhabited by spirits of the dead. A place that is haunted is thought to be associated by the haunting spirit with some strong emotional connection to the past, whether that be remorse, fear, or even terror of a violent death that they had. And now, individuals that are haunted are thought to be responsible for or associated with the ghost's unhappy past experience. Now, the traditional visual manifestations of ghosts and ghostly spirits are like the displacement of objects, apparitions, the appearance of strange lights, auditory signs like laughter and loud screams, footsteps, ringing doorbells, and sometimes a spontaneous emanation of the sound of an instrument. In many traditional accounts, ghosts were often thought to be deceased people looking for vengeance, or deceased people that were imprisoned on earth for life for what they had did in their past. And so the appearance of a ghost has been often regarded as a bad omen or portent of death. Krampus, or Krampus is the pronunciation I'm going to use, is a horned anthropomorphic figure in a popular Central European legend. He is a half-goat, half-demon creature monster that punishes misbehaving children at Christmas time. So basically the opposite of Santa Claus. He is the devilish companion of Santa Claus. Krampus is believed to have been originated in Germany, and the history of Krampus has thought to stretch all the way to pre-Christian Alpine traditions. So the creature and St. Nicholas are said to arrive on the evening of December 5th, which is now known as Krampus night. While St. Nicholas rewards the well-behaved children with candy and presents and whatnot. Krampus rewards misbehaving children with an ass beating. Krampus beats those who are naughty with branches and sticks, and in some cases Krampus even is said to eat the naughty kids or even drag them to hell. Yes. And then on December 6th, St. Nicholas Day, children awake to either find gifts or nurse their injuries. And then, yes, they celebrate him. Festivities of Krampus include the Krampus Run, which often includes alcohol and people dressing up as Krampus parading through the streets amid efforts to preserve their cultural heritage. And beginning in the late 20th century is when Krampus began to be getting celebrated internationally. And the monster's growing appeal was very evident as it started to inspire a lot of feature films, such as like Krampus in 2015. And another reason that Krampus has become such a popular like legend throughout the world is due to the commercialization of Christmas. The Yeti is often depicted as a large bipedal ape-like creature, sort of like Bigfoot, that is covered with brown, gray, or even white hair, and it is sometimes depicted as having large, sharp teeth. It is supposedly native to the Himalayas and also known as the abominable snowman. However, many countries, of course, have different depictions of this beast. And now often considered a relative to sorts of like Bigfoot, the Yeti stands out as being depicted as a more aggressive and dangerous creature. The misidentification of Himalayan wildlife has been proposed as an explanation for some Yeti sightings, including the Judah, which is a langur monkey living at lower altitudes, and also one being the Himalayan brown bear. A well-publicized expedition to Bhutan initially reported that a hair sample had been obtained, which by DNA analysis, Professor Brian Stykes could not match any known animal to this sample. But analysis completed after it's released to the media, and it was reported that these samples were from a brown bear or an acidic black bear. The Yeti has often been considered elusive despite its aggressive and dangerous traits. But, of course, there have been reports of the beast attacking the natives and their livestock. And this is what makes the Yeti different from Bigfoot, is that, like I said previously, the aforementioned Bigfoot is not aggressive. It is very elusive, very, passive. While, like I said, the Yeti is more dangerous and aggressive. The Yeti is often also depicted as carnivorous, even though that is not a universal trait. The idea of a carnivorous, hairy humanoid is also depicted in the myth of the Wendigo as well, which we will get to in a future video if you guys would like that. It is in tier 2, actually. And although it is not the most dangerous of any cryptids or mythical creatures that exist, the Yeti is nevertheless often believed to be the creature that we just leave alone. A troll is a giant monstrous being of Norse and Scandinavian folklore, sometimes possessing natural powers. Trolls dwell in isolated rocks, mountains, or caves, and they live together in small groups. And they live together in small family units and are very rarely helpful to human beings. So much, in fact, that they are very hostile to men. And they would also live in castles and haunt the surrounding area after dark. Because if they haunted during the day, trolls exposed to sunlight will burst or turn into stone. In later tales, trolls are man-sized or even like beings similar to dwarves and elves. They live in mountains, sometimes steal maidens, and can transform themselves and prophesy. They are often also in the form of aboriginal race, endowed with like oversized ears and noses. They are often depicted with tails and hairy ears, similar to the ears of a lynx. There are many different types of depictions of trolls, whether that be the Scandinavian troll or the northern Germanic troll. There isn't a single depiction, like a sure form depiction of a troll, with the hairy ears or with the tails or just being hairy or like I said before, being giants and monstrous, being small like a gnome, just all sorts of different ways that trolls can look. A werewolf is a man who turns into a wolf at night, devours animals, people, corpses, all sorts of things, but returns to a human form by day. While some werewolves can change their shape at will, others in whom the condition is hereditary by being bitten by a werewolf, change shape involuntarily or under the influence of a full moon. If a werewolf is wounded in its wolf form, those wounds will show up during their human form as well. And so this could lead to their overall detection. The psychiatric condition in which a person believes that they are a werewolf is known as lycanthropy. In antiquity, the ancient Greeks and Romans believed that the power of exhaustion would cure people of lycanthropy. And so a victim of this psychiatric condition would be subjected to long periods of physical activity to hopefully purge their condition. And so this practice stemmed from the fact that many alleged werewolves would be left feeling weak and debilitated after their night as a werewolf. There are many ways in which you can cure a werewolf or have been thought to be able to cure a werewolf. One being striking it on the forehead or the scalp. One being nailing, hammering nails through his hands. Or merely just scolding the werewolf is another that has been thought to be able to cure a werewolf as well. In countries where wolves are not as common, there are different forms in which a werewolf can take, such as a bear, a tiger, or a hyena. And it is unclear exactly where and when the werewolf legend originated. A phoenix is a sacred immortal firebird that cyclically regenerates. A phoenix obtains new life by arising from the ashes of its predecessor. Some legends say it dies in a show of flames and combustion, while others say it just dies and decomposes simply before being born again. It is associated usually with Greek mythology, but it has many analogies in other cultures as well. And over time, the phoenix came to be associated with specific colors. But although the phoenix is generally believed to be colorful and vibrant, sources provide no clear consensus of its coloration. The appearance of a phoenix differs over time, as some depict it as an eagle-like bird with red and gold feathers. Others depict it as in the same crest of like a peacock. The phoenix may have been inspired by a similar creature by the name of Bennu in Egyptian mythology. The Bennu was a sacred bird and was considered to be the manifestation of the soul of the solar god Ra. But rather than it being an eagle-like bird, the Bennu was a type of now extinct large heron. The phoenix is sometimes pictured in medieval literature and medieval art endowed with a halo, which emphasizes the bird's connection to the sun. And in the oldest images of the phoenix, these nimbuses have 7 rays, like Helios, who is the Greek personification of the sun. A unicorn is a mythological animal resembling a horse or a goat with a single horn on its forehead. The earliest description of a unicorn was that it was a wild ass the size of a horse with a white body, a purple head, and blue eyes. And on its forehead was a large horn, red at the tip, black in the middle, and then white on the base. Those who drank from the horn of a unicorn were thought to have been protected from stomach illnesses, epilepsy, and poison. Unicorns are very fleet on foot and extremely hard to capture. The actual animal behind these early descriptions was most likely the Indian rhinoceros. As you can tell, a rhinoceros has a single horn, and it's easy to misidentify as a horse. Duh. Now, during the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, the unicorn was commonly described as a wild woodland creature and as a symbol of purity and grace, and could only be captured by a virgin. And then also during the medieval and Renaissance times, the horn of a narwhal would usually be sold as the horn of a unicorn. And notably, in Greek mythology, the unicorn is not found, but rather in the accounts of natural history. And so for Greek writers of natural history, they were convinced in the reality of unicorns. So yes, they believed that unicorns existed and that they lived in India, which was a fabulous realm for them. In southern New Jersey and Philadelphia folklore, the Jersey Devil, which is also known as the Leeds Devil, is a legendary creature said to inhabit the forest of pine barrens in southern New Jersey. The common description is that it is a sort of bipedal kangaroo or vern-like creature with a horse or goat head, leathery bat-like wings, horned, small arms with clawed hands, legs with cloven hooves, and a forked tail. You got me? This Jersey Devil often glows, and it can breathe fire or poison water with its breath. It has been reported to move quickly, and it has been also reported to emit a high, blood-curdling scream. The most widely believed origin of the Jersey Devil is that Mrs. Leeds, a resident of Estville, was distraught when she learned that she was expecting for the 13th time. The unlucky number 13. And so when she gave birth to her child, she cursed it. So this baby was born as this weird hairy creature, and after its birth, it gave a screech, unfolded its wings, flew out the window to an adjacent swamp, and started taking to the populace, scaring, terrorizing, and eating children. Now, the Jersey Devil of modern sightings is almost a completely different creature. And now the name Jersey Devil has been applicable to any New Jersey cryptid. So a number of well-publicized but not very convincing hoaxes have managed to just confuse the matter of the Jersey Devil, and it pretty much just scares any researchers away. And in cryptozoology, the Jersey Devil is just one that investigators have just been choosing to ignore and avoid because of how bare and how all over the place it seems to be now. Because, like I said, it used to be this one many featured being, but now in Jersey cryptids, it's pretty much anything that's weird and mysterious. So I see and understand why cryptozoologists choose to ignore it. Gray aliens, also referred to as greys, are typically shown to be gray-skinned, diminutive humanoid beings that possess reduced forms of or just completely lack external human body parts such as noses, ears, or sex organs. Their bodies are usually depicted as being elongated with a small chest and lacking in any muscular definition and a visible skeletal structure. Their legs are depicted as usually small, shorter, and jointed differently than humans, with limbs also proportionately different from a human. Greys are depicted as having unusually large heads in proportion to their body and having no hair, sometimes with small openings or orifices for ears and noses and mouths. Gray alien sightings make up for about 40% of all alien sightings. The greys commonly abduct people in their sleep, and they take them away to like strange, horrifying places to do experiments on them. These experiences are often forgotten by the victims when they wake up, and physical reminders of these encounters are often left on them, such as bruises, surgical incisions, punctures, or mysterious triangular burns. These reminders are what often turn the memory of just a harmless nightmare into a very harsh and horrifying reality. Some abductees have said that they were taken to like this weird nightmarish place where exist ungodly creatures stuck in like cells or brought up in nurseries, humans tortured in different ways in every window, and far more unspeakable things. And then the greys threaten such like punishments on them unless victims comply. Greys are also said to fly in UFOs and are said to have technology far more advanced than us. An interesting idea is that gray aliens are just humans from the future who have evolved and traveled back to study the past. And then some theories even claim that the gray aliens and the US government are working together. In a trade-off, the gray aliens handed the US government like technological blueprints in exchange for the amnesty to abduct human beings and conduct experiments on them. Some even say that the government and the gray aliens, have a top secret base somewhere on Earth, whether that be Area 51 or literally anywhere else, where they work on projects of genetic engineering and mutation, particularly on humans. It is a leading theory that the greys conduct experiments and kidnap humans to keep the gray species alive, since it is apparent that they have no reproductive organs. And so many women have claimed that their newborn babies have been abducted by the greys, unborn children have been stolen, and then presented to them after being infused with the gray DNA. And so these gray human hybrids look so much like us that we would never know or be able to spot a difference in them. And so another theory is that these hybrids exist on the Earth right now, just coexisting with us and living in our society as normal human beings. A hellhound is a supernatural dog in folklore that originates in the underworld. The hellhound has been said to have been seen several times throughout history, and it is not specific to any one place, but they are commonly associated with graveyards and the underworld. Hellhounds are said to be as black as coal and smell of burning brimstone, and they tend to leave behind a burned area wherever they go. Other features that have been attributed to hellhounds include glowing red eyes, or sometimes yellow, razor-sharp teeth, super strength or speed, ghostly or phantom characteristics, a foul odor, and sometimes even the ability to talk. And in cultures that associate the afterlife with fire, hellhounds may have fire-based abilities and appearance as well. While most pictures show the hellhound to be evil and vicious, this is simply not the case, as hellhounds do not have to look evil or scary looking. They can look like any large dog with pure black fur. They are often assigned to guard the entrances to the world of the dead, such as graveyards and burial grounds, or undertake other duties related to the afterlife or the supernatural, such as hunting lost souls or guarding supernatural treasure. In European legends, seeing a hellhound or hearing its howl is a death omen, but while considered a bad omen, the hellhound has often helped as well. The supernatural dog was said to help warn people of danger and protect them when they need it. And the dog is often very loyal and protective of those who call upon it. And while the creatures are often known as evil, they are not as evil or even remotely as evil as one would suggest. In Greek mythology, the race of a centaur is composed of part human and part horse, having the body and torso of a horse and having the head and arms of a man. And there are over 40 types of centaurs. This half human and half animal composition has led many writers to treat them as liminal beings, both as the embodiment of untamed nature. And so a theory suggests that the idea of a centaur began when non-writing cultures first reacted to nomads who mounted on horses, as this theory suggests that these non-writing cultures would perceive these nomads as half man and half horse. So really, it was just foreign to them. A leprechaun is a fairy-like, diminutive, supernatural creature in Irish mythology. They are often mischievous creatures who spend their time making shoes or hiding their pots of gold at the end of rainbows. Leprechauns may grant wishes to humans who capture them, and the sound of hammering betrays his presence. He possesses a hidden crock of gold, and if captured and threatened with bodily violence, he might, if his captor keeps his eyes on him, reveal its hiding place. But usually the captor would end up getting tricked into looking away, and the leprechaun would vanish. A leprechaun usually takes the form of an old man with a red or white beard, clothed in either red or a green coat. Popular depiction shows the leprechaun as being no larger than a small child with a beard and a hat. However, originally its appearance depended on where it was found, such as before the 20th century, leprechauns wore red, opposed to what we most know them now as to wear green. And it is stressed that although the leprechaun seems to be thought of as a fairy or maybe called a fairy, it is clearly distinguished from that. A leprechaun being solitary is one distinguishing characteristic, but additionally, the leprechaun is only thought to engage in pranks on a level of mischief and requiring special caution. But in contrast, other fairies may carry out deeds more menacing, like the spiriting away of children. A fairy is a type of mythical being or legendary creature found in the folklore of multiple European cultures, a form of spirit often described as metaphysical, supernatural, or preternatural. The fairy has magic powers and dwells on Earth in close relationship with humans. It can appear as a dwarf creature, typically having green clothes and hair, kind of like the just previously mentioned leprechaun, living underground or in stone heaps, and characteristically exercising magic powers to benevolent ends. It can also appear as a diminutive spirit, commonly in the shape of a delicate, beautiful, ageless, winged woman dressed in diaphanous white clothing, inhabiting fairyland, but making usually well-intended intervention in human affairs. Or, also, it can appear as a tiny, mischievous, and protective creature, generally associated with a household hearth. The common modern depiction of fairies in children's stories represents a bowdlerization of what was once a very sinister folkloric tradition, as the fairies of the past were feared and dangerous, powerful beings who were sometimes friendly to humans, but mostly and usually cruel and mischievous. Fairies are usually conceived as being characteristically beautiful and handsome, and as having lives correspondingly similar to that of a human, though much longer. They have no soul, and at death simply perish. They often carry off children, leaving changeling substitutes, and they also carry off adults to fairyland. People transported to fairyland cannot return if they eat or drink there, and fairy and human lovers may marry, though only with restrictions that if the marriage is to end, the human's life would end as well. And so for this reason, female fairies are said to be very deadly to human lovers. Some evidence of fairies come in the form of fairy mounds and fairy rings, also known as fairy hills or fairy forts. These remains are said to be the homes for fairies and or other supernatural beings, or even portals to the other world. According to English and Celtic mythology, fairy rings are caused by fairies and elves dancing around in a circle at night. And if any human stumbles upon these festivities and enters a fairy ring, they are forced to dance until they are driven insane, die, or pass out from exhaustion. The giant anaconda is an exaggerated version of the already monstrous anacondas living in South America. The legendary serpents are often reported as being 2 to 3 times larger than the already giant anacondas that live there. Giant anacondas are quite similar to a normal anaconda. In fact, people who report seeing a giant anaconda just refer to it as a larger version of that species. Pound for pound, the largest snake species on the earth is the green anaconda. The largest green anaconda on record is 29 feet long and weighs 550 fucking pounds. A true gargantuan of a snake. Still, giant anacondas dwarf even this large of a snake, as the average giant anaconda would be 165 feet long. Like regular anacondas, giant anacondas have dark green grayish skin and like large black egg-like spots, and they may also have like yellowish like spots on their underbelly. Both their jaws and their skin expand, allowing them to swallow meals of like ghastly size. And then a terrible stench is also associated with the giant anaconda as well. The giant anaconda's native legend is probably even more terrifying, as instead of having gray greenish skin, they can be like pitch black, have horns or like very large fiery eyes. And the legend of the giant anaconda like goes all the way back to like Amazonian cultures, but the giant anaconda lore wasn't really popularized until the European colonists brought this sort of influence on the more scientific Western world to South America. Giant anacondas are often spotted like right after they've eaten, and their main diet consists of cougars, jaguars, humans, and boats. Makes sense. Giant anacondas are strict constrictors, so just like their smaller relatives. So when they first attack, they pin their prey with their large gargantuan jaws, and then they begin to coil them and squeeze all the way until their prey gives out. And according to some South American legends, the giant anaconda is also known as a shapeshifter as well, and sometimes they spend their lives in some sort of a human form. And finally, they also act as protectors of nature itself. Genies, traditionally called Djinn, are mythical beings deeply rooted in Indian and Islamic religion. They often look similar to humans, but also are depicted as like wisps of smoke. In many works of fiction, genies are often found by humans by inhabiting inanimate objects, most notably an oil lamp. And if a human disturbs said object, then the genie will appear. And the nature of genies can differ between being benevolent and subservient to being vicious and deceiving. A generalization of genies in stories is that they are like servants to mortals and to humans. But however, according to Muslim beliefs, genies have free will. So it's really up to the genie to decide if it will serve or grant its mortal. Many works of fiction do not take the entirety of the mythology into account, describing genies to only partially act on their own. Jinn date back all the way to the dawn of creation, according to Islam. They were among the 3 major races that Allah had created, the other 2 being angels, who were made from light, and humans, who were made from the earth. The Jinn were made from fire, in which no smoke arose. While angels had no free will, like humans, the Jinn did have free will and was capable of doing both good and evil. In many cases, genies are depicted as having half human bodies, like the top half, and then the bottom half would be like a wispy haze for legs, and some even just look like a normal, regular human being. Genies can wield phenomenal power, such as shape-shifting, manipulation of weather, and in some cases, bending reality to a certain extent, but even that power may have its limits, though. They cannot kill under their own power, and they cannot grant the wish to kill. Though they can bestow like weapons upon like who they're serving, allowing them to kill. And also, genies are not able to tamper with free will. So, for example, genies are not able to force someone to be in love with someone else. And finally, with genies, they are incapable of necromancy and have no power of the dead. So naturally, they cannot return someone to life in any way, shape, or form. Pegasus is a mythical winged divine horse and one of the most recognized creatures in all of Greek mythology, and they are usually depicted as being pure white in color. The myth said that Pegasus was the son of the mortal Medusa and Poseidon. Pegasus and his brother Chrysaor were born from the blood of their beheaded mother, Medusa. And a more detailed version is that they were born after Medusa's blood mixed with the sea. And the myth is said that Pegasus was born a winged horse because his father Poseidon had the shape of a horse when he was seducing Medusa. When Pegasus was born, a huge thunder with lightning pierced the sky, and that's how his connections to the forces of the skies were established. But the most common version of the myth about Pegasus says that the goddess Athena tamed Pegasus and gave him as a gift to Perseus, who later needed to fly far away to help his lover Andromeda. And so with Pegasus, in any case, any story, any myth about Pegasus, he always ends up on Mount Olympus and serves Zeus with his thunder and lightning magic powers whenever the supreme god wished for him. And his main caretaker through his youth, Muse Urania, welcomed Pegasus's return in full joy and happiness. Pegasus lived on Mount Olympus to his last day, and ever since then he became an inspiration for artists of all kinds, a fantasy for kids who dream of their own Pegasus to reach the mysterious caves and labyrinths of their own imagination. And on that note, thank you for watching. That was the end of Tier 1 of the Cryptids and Mythical Creatures Iceberg. Feel free to comment on the video if you enjoyed it, as this has taken me a very, very long time to film. As you could probably tell from the clothing changes, the camera changes, it's taken me a couple sessions and a couple days to film, and I hope it's worth it. I hope you guys really did enjoy it, and thank you for watching, and thank you for listening to me talk for probably about an hour or so, an hour and a half or something like that. Feel free to comment, like I said below, if you liked it, and comment below what your favorite cryptid or mythical creature is on Tier 1. I'd say mine would have to either be like ghosts, giants. I like Bigfoot, of course, you know, other things like that, I guess. I like the Hellhounds. They're cool. Just everything, really. I enjoyed doing this. It's very great. It's a very great time. It's nice to learn as well as educate, I guess, because I'm learning as well. I'm learning when I research this stuff. I'm learning a lot as well, and so it's nice to be learning. If you like this style of video, I have a few others on the channel, one most notably being the torture method and execution iceberg I have posted. I'll put like a card somewhere, and then I also have a chart of horror genres that I explained through. Those two videos are some of my favorites that I made. Yeah, and if you enjoyed this video, I'm sure you'd enjoy those ones as well. But yeah, thank you for watching, and thank you for listening. If you enjoyed me, or if you just enjoyed this video, you know, just let me know, and I'll continue to make more like this. But feel free to check out the channel. I have an abundance of videos. I've done quizzes and educational videos, true crime, all of that sort. I also have a short film called Gluttony. It's out on the channel if you'd like to watch that as well. It's pretty good, in my opinion, of course. It's mine. Of course, I think it's pretty good. It's unique, and so if you like unique, I think you'd enjoy it. So yeah, these videos do take a lot of time and effort, so if you did enjoy, please let me know and I will do them again, because without the response, I don't know if I would keep doing it. So thank you all for that, and that's all I've got today for this video. If you enjoyed this one and would like to see the rest of the iceberg, or even just Tier 2, let me know and I will start doing the research and all that jazz for it, and I'll get that video out as soon as possible. But yeah, once again, thank you for watching and thank you for listening. I hope you have a splendid day and a splendid night. It's been a Whistle in the Woods. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, and goodbye.